Hi, this video is going to be on muscle fiber recruitment, and this concept of recruitment is sometimes difficult for people, so I want you to pay close attention here. Recruiting is often when something sort of says, oh, we want you to do the job, or you've been sort of picked out or you've been told to do something. And so this is showing that sometimes when we use our bodies all the time, we use a little bit of force, like picking up a piece of paper, or we use a lot of force when picking up something heavy. And so depending on if we're going to pick up something small and light or big and heavy, we're going to recruit, if you think of these as muscle cells, more fibers for something heavy and less fibers for something light. And that's why here you need less fibers. And this is basically, in summary, a signal from your brain that travels down your nerves and then communicates with the muscle cells. And that's basically what recruitment is. So sometimes we call this motor unit recruitment because remember, a motor unit is the nerve cell, the neuron, and the fibers that it innervates. And so this is how we can alter our force production depending on what we're doing at that time. And so this graph is showing the force production at low. You use less motor units, and they use smaller ones like type 1 fibers. This was discussed in the previous video. As you get into more force, you use bigger motor units that have larger neurons and communicate with more muscle fibers. And when you get into high force, then you're going to use extremely large motor neurons. Here's the motor neurons, and you're going to use more muscle fiber cells. So if you want to activate, this is important for developing and changing type 2X fiber types. If you want to utilize and activate your type 2 fibers, you have to first activate all of your type 1s, then your type 2As to get to your type. So you can't just do something that only uses these and not these, meaning there's no way you can really strength train without using your type 1 fibers, which is very hard for some people to grasp. It's not like you're using these or these. You're using these when you've already exhausted all your other ones. And that's, in summary, what this whole graph is sort of saying, that you have to go through all the smaller ones to get to the bigger ones. And that's a key concept. So it's because your body's extremely efficient, you're going to activate the minimum number of motor units needed. And if you don't need a lot and you don't need the strong ones, then you don't use them. And aerobic energy has some benefits to it. And you think about this, you don't have all the intensity, so why use it? And so every single time, this is the order. And so the size principle says the order of recruitment of motor units directly related to the size of the neurons. So a bigger neuron is going to have bigger pool of muscle fibers that it activates. They'll be more involved, just like the picture in the beginning. So if you're just picking up something light, like using your hands, you just use the smaller motor units with the smaller neurons. And so here we can just see it's a smaller neuron. That's a neuron right there coming out of the brain and the spinal cord, and it's just talking to a couple of fibers. Here's a slightly bigger neuron. These little red circles are muscle fibers. And when we get into higher strength, then we have a larger neuron innervating larger fibers. So it's just being efficient. You only use the larger motor neurons down here when you need a large force. It's that simple. And notice the size of the fibers, the diameter goes from small to medium to large. So it's a gradual recruitment. And notice you're going to have more stimulation from your brain and your spinal cord to activate. So there's just going to be a change in the way your brain and your neurons send signals. And the action potential describes the way a neuron sends a signal. So the signal will be more frequent and it'll be more intense to get the larger motor neurons, the larger muscle fibers going, because it makes sense. Sort of like getting a bigger ball rolling takes more energy, and it's the same concept. Notice you're going to have a greater force with larger motor unit, and the motor unit is the neuron plus the muscle fiber. So in review, you sort of have, once you activate this neuron, we call this an all or none response, meaning once you've activated, it's kind of like a stack of dominoes. It's going to talk to the fibers it talks to. And so the way you adjust is you can activate different neurons that are connected to different muscle fibers. And for low intensity, you activate the neurons that are connected to the type 1 fibers. And as you get an increasing intensity, you're going to change the type of neuron, and it'll have a bigger, fatter neuron and bigger, fatter fibers and communicate with more fibers. So you have more, force being generated. And once again, we already talked about this in the last video. So when we think about forces, it's going to go back to which ones are recruited. That's it for this video.